At the turn of the new millennium, Mazda was under the wing of Ford. This, of course, meant sharing joint technologies. The Mazda 2 was closely related to the Fiesta, and the Mazda 3 to the Focus. Oddly enough, in the case of the Mazda 6 and Ford Mondeo, each manufacturer went their own way. These cars received different platforms and different suspensions. At the same time, they used the same four-cylinder petrol engines, starting with 1.8 liters. In Mazda these units are known as the L series, and in Ford, Mi5. Commercial designation MZR and Duratec HE respectively. These engines first appeared in 2000 under the hood of the third-generation Mondeo. Mazda followed Ford 2 years late with the new Mazda 6, GG/GY. In fact, these units only have the same base in the form of an aluminum block and cylinder head. The rest was a little different. And since the engines were constantly modernized, in later models the differences between them were already quite significant. The first Mondeos, produced before 2003 to 2004, became famous for problems with swirl flaps in the intake manifold. They improve engine performance over a wide RPM range. As their end approached, a specific sound was detected, reminiscent of a rumble. In extreme cases, the valves could even come off, meaning damage to the valves and piston bottoms. Many, fearing for possible consequences, simply removed the dampers. Ford responded to the problem by modifying the valves, replacing the fragile plastic with a more durable material. Soon the disease reappeared in the fourth-generation Mondeo and its derivatives, S-Max and Galaxy. Moreover, here it was no longer possible to simply dismantle the dampers, since they had feedback from the engine control unit. As a result, the engine malfunction indicator came on. Mazda engines also used dampers in the intake manifold. But due to their different design, practically nothing is known about problems with them. In addition, depending on the engine version and its volume, different systems for changing the geometry of the intake channel, with different operating principles, were used. The smallest 1.8 MZR, labeled L8, as well as the 2-liter LF used VTCS, variable tumble control system. We are talking about swirl flaps with a falling effect. The sucked air rotates in a vertical plane. The same principle was used in the aforementioned Mondeo engine. The VTCS system in L-series engines is a derivative of a similar system previously used in the 1.8 BP series engines of the innovative Mazda MX-5 NB. The largest in the line, 2.3 liters, L3, uses a VTCS and VAD, variable air duct, system. In the latter case, we are talking about a damper in the air filter box, which improves engine filling at high speeds. In addition, the VIS, variable intake air system, is installed here, a derivative of the VICS, variable induction control system, which was used in the 2-liter FS series engines of the Mazda 323BJ model. To eliminate the significant difference between cylinder size and stroke, the largest engine, 2.3L, received an additional cartridge with a balancing shaft. Starting in 2005, as part of the transition to Euro 4, the VIS system went to the 2-liter LF. Of course, the VTCS swirl flaps were retained. Other changes as part of the transition to Euro 4 include a system for changing the timing of the intake valves. Until this time, the phase regulator was used only in the large 2.3 L3. Also from the L3, an electric throttle valve was borrowed. The smallest 1.8, L8, continued to use a mechanically controlled throttle body and fixed valve timing. I have good news for you. Now, if you are planning to buy a used car, or learn more about your car, you no longer need to search for the information you need on the internet. We have collected everything in one place for you, on the website carme.pro. Here you can find out everything about the car, what breaks and at what mileage, any problems with engines, chassis or gearboxes, which trim levels are better not to mess with and how not to lose money buying a used car. You will learn all this on carme.pro. Some Mazda engines suffer from increased oil consumption. First of all, these are the older 6-cylinder engines of the K series, as well as the 1.8 BP, known not only from the MX-5NA and NB, but also from the Mazda 323BA and BJ. On the other hand, individual motors do not consume a drop of oil. These include the 4-cylinder 1.5Z5 series, Mazda 323, or the 1.6B6 series used in the older MX-5 and MX-3. Oil consumption is usually a sign of engine problems, in extreme cases due to worn cylinders. However, some Mazda engines consumed oil when they were new, which can be attributed to the peculiarities. Sometimes increased oil consumption is also inherent in the L-series units under consideration. Moreover, some do not consume oil at all, while others revel in a liter per 2,000 kilometers. Presumably, this is influenced by a number of factors, from the driving style of the first owner to the oil used. Mazda recommends an oil with a viscosity of SAE 5W30. Some experts even advise using 10W60, intended for use in engines with a significantly higher thermal load. It is especially suitable for MX-5 Roadster engines, whose drivers often drive dynamically. The main thing is to comply with the ASEA A3 or APISL specification and change the oil no later than 10,000 kilometers or every other year. Experience shows that 2.3-liter L3 engines are most susceptible to oil consumption. One reason could be the same tall pistons as in the smaller 2.0, but with the same diameter and significantly increased stroke. However, short pistons are also mentioned as a reason for increased oil consumption. At least this applies to the aforementioned 4-cylinder 1.8 BP and 6-cylinder K series. In addition, the 2.3-liter engine had an unusually low oil reserve of only 3.5 liters. On the other hand, the two smaller engines received 4.3 liters of oil. The manufacturer later corrected the error. L3 purchased a larger oil pan and a different dipstick. The oil supply has increased to 4.7 liters. Since 2007, an even larger version of the 2.5-liter engine, designated L5, has appeared in the second-generation Mazda 6. Here the cylinder diameter was expanded to 89 mm, and the piston stroke reached 100 mm. The design, with some modifications, was borrowed from the L3 engine, including the balanced shaft cassette. Oil volume increased to 5 liters. Surprisingly, this engine consumes an excessive amount of oil only in exceptional cases, which is rather the norm for engines with a capacity of 2.0 and 2.3 liters. The only way to prevent engine wear due to increased oil consumption is to regularly check the oil level with a dipstick. There is no oil level sensor here. It is not present in the second-generation Mazda 3 and Mazda 6 engines, as well as in the MX-5. DISI, direct injection. Mazda, like VW, offered a direct injection engine. Unlike the Germans, the Japanese did not introduce new fuel injection into the naturally aspirated engine. For innovation, a turbo engine was used. In 2006, the 2.3 DISI Turbo was introduced, intended for the sports model Mazda 6 MPS. Later it went to the Mazda 3 MPS. And until 2009, it was the only unit for the Mazda CX-7 crossover. The advantages of direct injection in the case of a turbo engine were obvious. This resulted in a relatively high compression ratio of 9.5 to 1 compared to 10.6 to 1 in the naturally aspirated version 2.3, L3. Installing direct injection required a new cylinder head and, of course, pistons. The fuel system received two pumps, low pressure in the fuel tank and high pressure driven by the camshaft cam. The 2.3 DISI Turbo is quite powerful, but has a number of disadvantages. For longevity, it is very important not to rev the turbo engine until it is fully warmed up. Cars with more than 150,000 kilometers mileage usually already consume oil. As a rule, it does not escape through the piston rings, but through the turbocharger bearings. The problem occurs when the engine is operated for a long time with little oil. In this case, the piston rings lie, and scuffing occurs on the cylinder walls. A new turbocharger is quite expensive. A remanufactured supercharger is significantly cheaper. Mazda does not supply spare parts for turbocharger repair. However, Hitachi is engaged in the production of turbines and spare parts. 2.3 DISI Turbo requires only high-quality fuel with an octane rating of 98. Some motorists recommend periodically alternating 98 with 95, which supposedly reduces the likelihood of soot formation. The 2.0 DISI was introduced in 2011, and this time the engine was naturally aspirated. If in Mazda 3 he behaves with dignity, then in Mazda 6 he lacks strength. But the engine is more economical than its analog with distributed injection. Surprisingly, the 2.0 DISI presents virtually no problems. L-series engines were no longer used by Mazda with the advent of Skyactiv technology. However, the previous engines remain absolutely amazing and responsive, quickly respond to the gas pedal. The above is true even for the smallest 1.8-liter unit. But finding a well-groomed specimen is not easy. The engine that lasted the longest on the assembly line was the 1.8 and 2.0 variants. All thanks to the MX-5, which was offered until 2015.